How's it going today, guys? So today we're going to be talking about how to build credit as a young person, or how to establish credit as someone who may have a bad credit history, but you're looking to rebuild your credit. So I'm going to give you guys advice, and some of this works for someone who is looking to reestablish credit, but all of these pieces of advice will work for someone who is looking to build credit for the first time as a young person. Because this is a common problem that we run into, because it's one of those things where you need credit established in order to get approved for a line of credit, but how do you initially establish that credit? Who's going to be the first one to trust you and loan you a line of credit? So I have some excellent tips for you guys, and I'm going to share my personal experience as well with this to let you guys know how I built credit as a young person and how I have the credit score I do today. So first of all, what is a credit score? So a credit score is basically a numerical representation that represents the credit worthiness of an individual. So there's three main scores that are used. There's three credit rating agencies that will rate your credit and report these back to people who are looking to get a report on your credit. Number one is through Equifax, number two is Experian, and number three is the TransUnion FICO score. And all three of these will be scored slightly different. So for example, my credit score through Equifax was a 757, while my FICO score came in at a 761, so they were pretty close to each other. They use the same exact scoring mechanism, but the scores are slightly different. Now, when they give you a credit score, it's going to be on a scale of 300 to 850. 300 being the absolute lowest you could go, and 850 being the absolute highest you could go. So 850 is perfect credit. That's the highest credit score you can get. And I don't know anyone with a credit score of 850. I do know some people, though, with credit scores in the 800s, so that is fantastic. But if you look at the actual credit score, this is going to break down who has, excellent credit versus good credit versus fair, poor, or bad credit. So if you're someone who is in the range of 300 to 580, you have bad credit. If you're in the range of 580 to 640, you have poor credit. 640 to 700, I think that's the average credit, somewhere in there. That's fair credit. If you're above 700, you're doing pretty good. So 700 to 750 is considered good credit, while 750 to 850 is considered excellent credit. So this is the first time that I've actually fallen into the category of being above 750. So I'm actually someone with excellent credit because I've been building it for years and I've been really good with payments and I've been using credit cards in the right way. And we're going to talk about all this later on when we talk about ways to establish or build your credit. But first of all, I just want to stress the importance of having a good credit score and why you actually need to establish credit, because it's so crazy to me how many young people were never taught this, and they end up so far behind in the future because they have no credit established. And they're either trying to buy a house or buy a car or get approved for student loans, and they can't get anything done. They have to get a co-signer for everything. And they're like, wow, why are some people so far ahead when it comes to credit? Why did some people get this lesson and then others didn't? So if you're somebody who is 18 years old, I highly recommend you start thinking about establishing credit because it's very easy to do it. Fortunately, the bank I was at is the one who recommended that when I turned 18, I opened up a secured line of credit. And we're going to talk about that in a second. But hopefully someone along the way has stressed to you the importance of establishing credit, especially at a young age. But here are 6 really good reasons as to why you need to have a good credit score. Number one, if you eventually plan on buying a house, you need to have good credit in order to be approved for a mortgage and also get a good rate on that mortgage. Number two, if you ever plan on buying a car. So most people probably buy a car used off Craigslist and they pay cash for it as a teenager. But if you do eventually want to drive a nicer car and you want to have a car payment, you're going to need to have good credit to be approved for an auto loan. So it's better to establish credit when you're younger. Then by the time you're in your 20s, you'll be able to be approved for a car loan at a good rate without having to have a co-signer or a co-borrower on there. Number 3 is getting a job. A lot of people don't realize this, but many employers run a credit check as well as a background check. So for most jobs, they are going to run a background check, but they also, in some cases, run a credit check to see how you are with your credit, to see if you are responsible with your payments and with your credit cards. Number 4, for renting an apartment, this is a big one. Most places that you rent in a good area, they're going to want a credit report. So they want to make sure you're responsible with your bills because they don't want to have you be a bad tenant. So if you do at some point want to rent your own place and it's going to be an area where they're likely going to check your credit, that's another good reason to establish credit. Number 5, if you have any plans on starting a business and you want to secure some kind of financing for that business, you need to have good credit in order to get a small business loan of some kind. And number 6 is probably the most important one, is getting a lower interest rate, because lower risk borrowers pay a lot less in interest. Unfortunately, there's a lot of bad people out there that charge just ridiculous interest rates for cars. A lot of those buy here, pay here places, they really take advantage of young people who have little credit established or they have bad credit. They're going to get you involved in some ridiculous 20% interest rate on some crappy used vehicle. Unfortunately, this happens to so many people, and they get roped into these scams, and I feel really bad that this is even legal to charge that much in interest. But I've personally talked to friends of mine who have cars that are used cars that they bought at some buy here, pay here place, and they're paying 20% interest on like a $10,000 used car, and it's like unbelievable. So you don't want to be in that situation. You need to think about establishing credit as a young person, or if you're somebody with poor credit, you really need to rebuild your credit. And let's go ahead and talk about how you go about doing that. And number 1 is probably the easiest one, especially for young people, and this is the first thing I ever did in order to establish credit, and that is to get a secured or backed credit card through your bank. So basically what they do is very simple. You're going to get a credit card backed by a CD or a certificate of deposit. Essentially what that is a account you deposit your money into, and that money is then locked up so you can't access it, and you get a small rate of return on the money you have invested in that CD. So in my case, I know I opened up a $500 CD and I got a 0.25% interest rate on it. So nothing earth-shattering, but the good thing was it was able to allow me to open up a credit card at that point, because the deposit in the CD matches dollar for dollar your credit limit extended to you by the bank. The CD is used as collateral, so it's zero risk for the bank, because if you load up that credit card and you don't pay it off, they seize that CD and they pay off the balance of your card that way. So there's no risk involved for the bank, because you're basically extending yourself your own line of credit that way. So I highly recommend this for young people. As soon as you turn 18, go to your bank and ask them about opening up a secured or backed credit card. And this is like the number 1 thing you can do to start building credit. I did this like the day I turned 18. I was a pretty wild teenager, as you can tell, worrying about my credit at 18 years old. But I am glad that someone pointed me in the direction of this and encouraged me to do this, because right now I have great credit for a young person. Then what I recommend doing is using the card to pay for gas and then paying it off each month. That's exactly what they told me to do at the bank. That's exactly what I did every week when I bought my gas. I put it on my secured credit card, and then when the bill came in the mail, I would pay the full balance. That way I'm not paying interest. You don't have to keep a balance on cards in order to build credit. You can pay it off each month, and you're going to build credit just as much as someone who carries a balance. So don't think you need to carry a balance on the card just because you have the ability to. So once the card is unsecured, you get your deposit back. So they either close out that secured credit card, or they may just take the requirement to have a backing on it off. In my case, they called me up one day and they were like, hey, you know, you've established enough credit, you've been responsible with your payments, we are going to take away the backing on your credit card. So now I still have a CD with that bank, which I should close out, but it's only $500, so it's not something that I think of regularly, but it is still out there. They just left it in a CD. But now I still have that same $500 credit card, but it's not backed by anything. Now it's a true line of credit, and I still use it in the exact same way. I put my gas on it, and then I pay it off each month. So you should look at a secured credit card as a way to open the door for an unsecured credit card. That's going to be the next step. So you don't want to just solely rely on that secured credit card. You want to use it to establish enough credit to the point where you'll be approved for a regular credit card that's not backed by a certificate of deposit. Here's another way you can build credit, and this is also great for people looking to establish credit over again. So if you had a bad buying history and you're looking to rebuild your credit, there is a credit builder loan. What's great, guys, is there's a lot of resources out there that are going to help you rebuild your credit. So if you have bad credit, it's not like you're doomed. I mean, you can rebuild it. It takes time, but it's very doable. So a credit builder loan I highly recommend for people who have bad credit now and they want to improve their credit score. Basically, this is a loan designed to help you build credit, or a forced savings plan. It's very simple, kind of similar to a backed credit card. Basically, you borrow a small amount of money short term. So this may be $500, $1,000, $1,500, and that money is placed in a CD. And as we said, that is an account that you can't access. You can't draw money from it. So the bank has that money in an account and they know you can't withdraw from it. So they offer you a loan, they put it over here in a CD, you earn a small rate of interest, and then you're going to pay off that loan plus some interest to the bank. And once the loan is paid in full, the funds are released to you and they're either held there in that CD or they're deposited into your account. So it's basically a forced savings plan that allows you to build credit in the same way. So this is a great way for people to establish or repair their credit. Number 3 is co-borrowing. Now you have to be careful with this because you have to understand if you are co-borrowing on someone's loan. So if your friend comes up to you and says, hey, trying to get approved for a car loan, they want me to pay 18% interest, but they say if I get a co-signer, my interest rate will be a lot less. Can you sign for me? Understand that if they don't pay that loan off, if they're not making their payments, you're responsible for those payments. So I know sometimes you're trying to help people out, but make sure this is somebody you trust. Make sure maybe it's a family member or a very close friend you're co-signing for, but understand you're responsible for that loan if they're not making their payments. But when you have a co-borrower, the combined credit qualifies that loan, and adding a co-borrower can help you get approved or lower your interest rate. So on the first car that I bought from an actual place that I didn't pay outright for when I got a loan, they wanted to give me a 9.99% interest rate, but I got my dad to co-sign with me, and that got me down to under 4%. Now, because I've established enough credit and I've since then got a different car, I'm on my own loan, and I have a good interest rate on a car, and I didn't have to have a co-signer. So that's one of the advantages of having good credit, is you don't have to pester your parents or your friends to get a co-signer. When you do this, when you do have a co-borrower, understand that both borrowers are responsible for that debt, so both borrowers build credit in the process. So having a co-signer or being a co-signer for someone, if you trust them, can be a way for you to build credit. Now, also one thing you can do is if you are possibly spending money that your parents give to you, or maybe your parents are paying for your food or for your gas, just become an authorized user on the credit card of a family member, and you're actually going to build credit history without the legal obligation of paying back that debt. So obviously, you want to make sure you're on the same page with what you're buying. Don't load up their credit card and go, here you go, I'm not obligated to pay that. That's a bad move. But if you're using that card anyway to pay gas, why not be an authorized user? That way you're able to build credit history in the process. So I highly recommend that too for young people. That's probably something you could do before or at the same time you're getting a secured or backed credit card. Number 4 is a huge one too, and people don't know this. I actually didn't know this until right now, but when I did the research for this, but there are actually paid services where you can track your rent payments and get credit for making rent payments on time. So there's paid services out there that allow you to get credit for paying your rent. You do have to pay for them each month in most cases, the ones I could see. I've never used one, so I can't recommend one, but I'm sure if you do some research or ask around, you could figure out what's the best one to use. But understand that rent payments that are not being reported are not building your credit. So unless you're renting from a large property owner, they may be reporting that. But if you're renting from a family member or renting from a friend or renting from somebody who has a very small number of homes, they're not reporting that as far as building your credit. So you have to, on your own, make sure you're reporting those on-time payments. So this is one way that you can build credit through on-time rent payments, and you can build credit with something you're already doing. So if you're somebody out there who's already paying rent every single month, you might want to look into a paid service to actually track those rent payments so you get credit for them, and this is another great way to build your credit. And it's going to help you when renting in the future because you'll be able to say, oh, here's my renting history, here's 3 years of on-time rental payments. So that's another great advantage of tracking your rent payments. It builds your credit and it helps you with renting in the future. Okay, so the question that many of you may be asking yourself right now is how long will this actually take? So if you're someone who just starts following these steps, you just begin to open a secured credit card, how long until you have a credit score or a credit history? It's going to take at least 6 months and maybe even up to 12 months, as well as repairing your credit until you see a difference. I think most credit agencies require you to have a 6-month history before they even generate a credit score. So it does take some time, but definitely after 12 months, if you've been following these steps, you should see your credit score going up, and you should be seeing your credit score recover if you're someone who is trying to reestablish credit. But I have 7 final tips for you guys here as far as good credit tips and things you should be doing to keep yourself from getting in a pinch and ending up in a bad situation where you have to rebuild your credit. Number one is pay all your bills on time because you want to avoid going into collections at all costs. So this could be cell phone bills, this could be medical bills, this could be your utility bills. If you get behind on your bills, they may send it to a collections agency and this may ding your credit. They may put a derogatory mark on your credit if your bills are in collections. So that is one way you can get yourself in trouble, is by not paying your bills. Number two, be responsible with credit card use. So aim for low or no credit utilization. Do not carry large balances on your credit cards because that is how people get in trouble when they can't keep up with their payments. And make sure if you are paying down a credit card, pay at least more than the minimum balance, because if you're paying that minimum balance, you're barely paying any principal. You're mostly paying interest and you're going to have that hanging around forever. Number three is keep track of balances and payments. So this is something that I actually did by accident. On my card, I didn't realize I had a balance on it. I think I had a $4 balance on one of my credit cards, and I had no idea I had a balance on it. So next thing you know, I get a call from my bank saying I have a late fee. I'm like, I don't have any balance on that card. And they go, oh, you have a $4 balance. And I'm like, what's the late fee? They're like, $25. I'm like, $25 for a $4 balance? So I talked to the lady. She got rid of that actual late payment because we talked about it. I explained I had no idea that I had a balance on there. So in most cases, if you do get a late fee or any kind of penalty, just call the bank up, talk to them and see if you can get rid of it, because in most cases I've heard people have been able to get rid of late fees just by calling. So don't just give in, make sure you call and try to get it resolved, but it's best to not end up in that situation anyway. So just keep track of your balances and when your payments are due, because if you have multiple cards, they may all be due at different times. So just stay on it and make sure you have the apps on your phone too, so you can just jump in there and check when things are due. Number four, avoid interest like the plague. Interest gets so many people in trouble when they get a credit card and they go, oh, I have $1,000. No, you don't. You have $1,000 available to you in a line of credit at likely 20+% interest. So don't go out there and buy a brand new iPhone and a bunch of clothes. Use it responsibly. Buy gas with it or buy groceries and pay it every single month. Do not load it up and then try to pay it down. That is not a good credit utilization strategy. That's how people get in a lot of trouble. Number five, open 2 accounts a year maximum, because every time you open an account, they have to run your credit and check your credit, and it's called a credit inquiry at that point. And every time they inquire about your credit, that is actually a mark that goes on your account. So make sure you keep track of every time someone inquires about your credit and try to avoid doing that more than twice a year. Number six, keep unused accounts open to build history. It's also a derogatory mark on your credit to close a credit. So if you do have a line of credit out there and you're not paying a monthly fee or a yearly fee to have that credit card, just leave it open because it's building credit history for you, and it's actually a derogatory mark when you close that account. And number seven, check your report monthly for errors. This is a very scary one, but I remember reading a story about a woman who had the medical bill of someone who shared the same name as her got assigned to her credit. So she logged on, or I think she was applying for a loan, applying for a car loan, and the guy there said, oh, your credit is terrible. And she was like, what are you talking about? I have phenomenal credit. And he said, you need to take care of your medical bills. And she goes, I have no medical bills. So she ended up finding out that there was a derogatory mark put on her credit score that didn't belong to her because it was the same name, but it was somebody else. So make sure you're checking your credit monthly in order to make sure there are no errors on there. And it took that woman months, if not a year, to actually resolve that. I remember it was a ridiculous process to actually get that mark removed from her credit score. So I hope that never happens to you guys, but make sure you do keep track of your score and make sure you don't have anything on there that shouldn't be on there. Anyways, guys, that's pretty much all I got for this video. This is how you build credit as a young person and how to establish credit if you have not so good credit. I hope you guys learned something from this video. If you enjoyed it, please drop a like. And if you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing to be notified of future uploads. And as always, I thank you guys for taking the time to watch this video.